WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide, and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Hey folks, welcome to Flashpoint inside the WCNC app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. This week, we're hearing from Charlotte's mayor in a one-on-one interview, really for the first time. He's about a week into the job at this point.
A week into the job at this point, and mind you, council is of course on their summer break, so this is giving him a chance until August to really get up to speed on some of these really massive issues, which you'll hear about in just a second. We're going to play that full interview, but we talked data centers, we talked I-77, we talked American Airlines. That lease negotiation is something that's going to have to be addressed during his tenure, because again, this is an 18-month term, so it is almost an entire term he's filling in.
And you sat down with him in his office at the Government Center this past week?
Yeah, and it was a quick interview, but it was a chance to really touch base for the first time since his appointment.
All right, let's take a listen.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. It's been a great process. It's been a quick process, but it's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do some things for, a city and people that I care a lot about, and so I'm really energized.
When did you make the decision to apply?
Shortly before the deadline. No, really, it was in that week. The council was working out the process, and I guess that was 4 weeks ago now. And we talked about it with colleagues and talked about it with my wife and my family, and decided in that run up to the time for the applications. And it's been a good fast process since then.
You have a unique background, of course, attorney and president of the NC Bar Association. How do you think that's going to help you in this job?
I'm accustomed to working through challenges and finding solutions. And I think that's a part of what you do, particularly in the mayor's role, but also accustomed to bringing together. I've worked with a lot of organizations, and you mentioned the Bar Association, but I chaired the Board of Trustees of the library, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library. I chaired the Arts and Science Council Board of Directors, and so I've spent a lot of time reaching consensus, bringing people together, and working, I'd like to think, for the public good. And I see this really as a continuation of that work.
This is your first time in public office in this way. What would you say to people who may have concerns about this being your first time in a very important role?
I think it goes back to the things that we said earlier. I've spent a lot of time working in and for this community. I think the skill set of being a lawyer and a problem solver is really helpful in this role. And I think that desire to get in and really get to know the council members and others in leadership in the community is a real plus. And so I think it's a real benefit. I think we're in this period of 18 months that is somewhat of a transition, a bridge from Mayor Lyles and that council to what will follow. And I think I'm well suited to that, and I'm excited about the challenge.
This council has faced a lot of big issues, which we'll get into later. One of them, though, is just kind of getting along and having meetings go smoothly, and there have been some tumultuous times over the last 2 years. How do you think as mayor you can kind of bridge that gap and kind of quell some concerns that people have?
Yeah, it's three things that I talked about, both when we were being interviewed for the position and then in my short comments after the swearing in. I think it all builds on trust. One, I'm relentlessly forward-looking, and I think that's the way to be in a role like this. And so it's not a comment about the past. I think we're building on a really strong past, a really strong foundation laid by Mayor Lyles and others in this community. But for my role, what I've always tried to do and what I'm beginning to do here is to work with each individual council member, really get to know them and build trust. So that as we translate that into meetings, I think it becomes easier to make sure meetings are orderly, make sure people are heard and that they feel like they're being heard. And I think if you can do that, you have structured meetings that the council members feel good about, that the community feels good about. I mean, we have, we're in some sense a business with 950,000 consumers and folks who rely on us. And I think we can project that in the way we do business. And then, sort of hand in hand with that is respect. We are in times where we've got lots of challenges. Every time we've got lots of challenges. But working through those challenges in a way that has people feel, I got heard, my view was respected, and therefore I can live with the outcome on a given issue. And I've done that with every organization I've been a part of, and I really look forward to trying to bring that to bear here.
You've got a month before the first meeting. What are your priorities?
You know, we touched on them, and a lot of my priorities, a lot of my, you know, sort of what drives me is that sense of making sure that government, council in particular, works as well as it can. And I think that's important to every council member I've talked to, even throughout the process. And so that's a, you know, it's a process kind of thing, but it's collaboration, it's working together well, and that's a real priority for me. And then we've got a host of issues that are you know, sort of well stated. Some of that dropped in the budget, some that in the budget bill, and some that dropped earlier that we've got to work through. I think we've got to continue to work more broadly on affordability. You know, we've talked about that, you know, every time that I've had an opportunity to talk now, and that's housing, but it's also, I think, more broadly making sure that Charlotte is as welcoming and as much of a base for success for folks who've lived here for generations as it is for folks who've moved here. I mean, the folks and the businesses moving here are vital to our continued success. And I think we do a good job of projecting that. We need to make sure that we're projecting the same thing for folks who've been here, you know, all their lives and their parents' lives.
I think that conversation about managing just the incredible growth of Charlotte with the history of Charlotte data centers is right at the middle of that. I know that we're in the middle of this moratorium, but this is going to be something that council has to address pretty quickly once, you know, you guys are back in session. So where do you stand on the issue of data centers, and how do you think you can balance growth and bringing businesses here with people's concerns?
Yeah, I'm glad we have the time. I mean, I've obviously come in right after the time that council put in place the moratorium. I think having the 150 days to really look at the issue is very important. You know, there are, you know, I think we have a sense of the questions. I think we're looking for the solutions. Obviously, you know, we're going to do a study. We're going to look at the ordinances that are in place. We're going to look at, you know, the state laws that are in place. But we've got to balance, you've said it, we've got to balance the need, you know, artificial intelligence and sort of our digital society are here. They're not coming, they're here. We've got to figure out how we as a society equally share and appropriately share the burdens of that.
You'd support, you know, some energy, some land usage restrictions for the city?
I think we've got to look at all of it, right? I think we've got to look at, you know, whether I mean, the data centers, for example, come in various sizes. You've got to look at, you know, whether there are things that need to be done to deal with the difference in size, volume of the facilities. But I think one of the things that the community is looking very hard at is to make sure that we realize we're going to need, at least I realize we're going to need data centers. We're going to need to power this, you know, sort of new way of doing business. And we've just got to make sure that the burdens that come with that are equally shared.
You mentioned the state budget. In it is that stipulation that communities that voted against I-77 to strike it down at the CRTPO will have to pay back that money. Where do you stand on I-77, and do you think that that will force Charlotte to have to change their vote?
So I think it's a couple of things. I think one, we're still working through it. That dropped, you know, the final resolution from the legislature and from the governor dropped late last week.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we and the attorney's office are working through making sure we understand everything that's in there. But then as we move forward, the key is community. It's how we engage, you know, the Charlotte community as broadly as we can in what the appropriate way of going forward is.
Another big issue, American Airlines. That is going to be something that isn't necessarily immediate. We've got a bit of time, but during your tenure, it will have to be addressed. Of course, the city does not get to set wages, but workers and the union are asking for council and the city to be a part of those negotiations and make workers' fairness part of that conversation. Where do you stand on that issue?
So I think you've said it. I mean, you know, our role is negotiating a lease agreement with the airlines. You know, with American being the largest player there. The airport is vital for this area, right? It's vital not just for Charlotte, but for North Carolina and for this region. It's a driver of the success that we've had that hopefully everybody in the community feels. That said, you know, we need to do what we can through, you know, we've done it to date with job fairs and other opportunities, but we need to help workers move through the system and recognize, you know, their goals as employees and as wage earners. So, you know, we'll continue to work through that over the next, you know, 10 or 11 months with those goals in mind.
So what you heard there was our full interview.
Yeah.
as you saw, it was very quick. And I do want to point out that he, just so nobody got to it first, did every single news outlet in one day, so there were 14 interviews that he did.
Wow. So take us behind the scenes. So you're up in the mayor's office at the government center corner office, and you were there with 13 other.
We got an assigned time.
Okay,
And so
throughout
I
the
was
day.
waiting in the lobby. I got taken upstairs with our photographer, Ken Shermer. We tried to set up as much as we can before we got in the room
Because everybody was given 15-minute slots.
15 minutes, but that includes the setup and tear down time.
Which speaking this morning with an Observer reporter, they discussed how they got 13 minutes, but because they didn't have a setup.
That is another element of this,
Yeah, sure.
So
That makes sense. Okay.
And you saw there a 2-camera shoot,
Yeah.
because of course you're speaking to the mayor, you want it to look good.
So it
but
takes a bit.
It takes a bit, and so we tried. I wish I got a chance to ask a couple more questions, but I mean, he was very friendly, and
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be more opportunities now that everyone's kind of gotten their initial questions asked to talk more. I really hope to next time I get a chance to sit down with him, dive more into public safety, because I know especially with the red light cameras coming back, that's going to be a big conversation. But I think the most pressing thing right now, as you and I have talked about repeatedly, is what to do about I-77. All of this is happening even in the last week or so since he's really
I
taken
feel
his
like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he was a little bit more committal to the data center topic than he was I-77, and that he acknowledged, hey, these are already here,
Yep.
and we're not going to quench our thirst for digital consumption by not building them, and we'll have to continue building these. But it sounds like he's, and a lot of people say this, making sure it's equally a burden equally shared upon everyone in the community, not just certain neighborhoods.
Exactly, and I think that's been a big concern of people too, is that it's ending up in certain neighborhoods. Something I will say though is I did explicitly, as you heard, ask about, does that mean you would be in support of regulations? Because that's what the city officials are taking this time to do, is to see what regulations they might put in place. And he didn't really give a clear yes or no. I didn't take it as a solid yes or no at least. But of course, I think that'll just have to come down to what he's presented with in the moment. Now, granted, of course, you and I have talked about repeatedly, the mayor does not get a vote, they get a tie-breaking vote. But as we've seen in this past term from Mayor Vi Lyles, she had a lot of really important tie-breaking votes.
Yep.
So the mayor's opinion is very important.
It is. All right, keep it right here on Flashpoint. After this, we're going up to Raleigh. The governor finally signing a budget after more than 1,000 days. That's coming up next.
Welcome back to Flashpoint here inside the WCNC Charlotte mobile app. As Ben mentioned, we're getting back out to Raleigh. That is really the other big news this week, as we finally have a state budget. It's more than a year late, but it is a state budget. This is Governor Josh Stein signing it earlier this week and sharing his thoughts.
These are real wins worthy of celebration and worthy of my signature. So after careful deliberation, this morning I will sign the state budget into law. I won't sweep this budget's flaws under the rug, however. The legislature is slashing more than 1,000 state government positions, making it harder for us to meet the people's health and safety needs. Many state employees' raises don't even keep up with inflation, and even the more meaningful raises that are in the budget still leave us lagging behind our neighbors in competitive salaries. The budget cruelly punishes low-income people who need access to justice. It eliminates the Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities, which ensures that all people can get the care they need to address their health conditions, as well as the Office of Historically Underutilized Businesses, which connects people to jobs and opportunities. It creates unfunded mandates for local governments. At the same time, the General Assembly is taking away mechanisms that are available to them to raise revenues. It makes real the General Assembly's wrong-headed threats of retribution against Charlotte. Charlotte needs to enhance road safety and minimize community impact, and that balancing process should be collaborative. It's full of unconstitutional and petty provisions that strip power from the executive branch, politicize state government, and undermine its efficiency. These provisions are certainly counterproductive, but as I previously noted, the legislature has accepted many of my big-ticket budget recommendations. And having just celebrated America 250 this weekend, We remember that our democracy has always run on compromise for the common good. And for these reasons, and because it delivers for North Carolinians in important ways, I support this budget. Let me tell you how it delivers. The budget delivers for Christian. Christian Martin is a Winston-Salem native who teaches 8th grade English and social studies in Craven County. He also serves on my teacher advisory committee, and he's here with us today. He's known that he wanted to become a teacher ever since he was in high school. And as his college friends were debating careers with better financial outcomes, he knew that to pursue his passion, he would have to make a financial sacrifice. Beginning teachers are choosing to forego other more lucrative careers, and if they stay in North Carolina, they're missing out on better salaries that they could earn in our neighboring states. But today we are beginning to right that wrong. This budget I'm signing delivers the largest raise for starting teachers in nearly a half a century. It is also the largest overall teacher pay raise in about 15 years. And when it comes to student outcomes, this budget embraces ideas that work: advanced teaching roles, science of reading expansion, school safety grants, apprenticeships, all ideas that I had included in my budget recommendation because they will improve student achievement. Our kids are our future, and no investment is more important than the ones we make in them. This budget delivers for Derek. Captain Derek Simmons is a shift supervisor at Noose Correctional Institution who's worked in corrections for 28 years. He works to provide offenders a safe environment, a positive role model, and a new way of thinking. But where he used to have 28 correctional officers on duty at a time, he now only has 7 or 8. These vacancies compromise security and strain the officers who remain. Our state is facing similar vacancy challenges across state law enforcement agencies and public safety. In fact, the State Highway Patrol is currently making do with about 350 sworn vacancies across the department. Vacancies happen when we don't invest in people, when we don't pay our hardworking law enforcement officers in a way that honors the demands of their work. This budget works to make it right with a minimum of a 13% pay increase for state law enforcement officers and correctional officers, as well as a $1,750 bonus for local law enforcement officers. Since serving as your Attorney General, I have been hearing from police chiefs and sheriffs, many of whom are here today, about their challenge of recruitment and retention. Because as we all know, law enforcement is not an easy job. It's a tough job, but it is a critical one for our communities. When we cannot recruit and retain public-spirited officers, North Carolina families become at risk. So we have to do everything in our power to support those who keep North Carolina safe. This budget takes important steps forward on public safety. This budget delivers for Joanna. I met Joanna Parker, a woman from Garner, who was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease but could not afford private health insurance. The best way of managing her condition is through doctor visits, medication, and physical therapy, but she couldn't afford the out-of-pocket payments of those services. One urgent care visit could cost her upwards of $900. Her disease prevented her from going to work to earn enough to afford her health insurance. When she finally got Medicaid coverage, she was able to get the necessary treatments, x-rays, therapy, and medications that allowed her to go back to work full-time, which is what she always wanted to do. 3 million North Carolinians, more than a quarter of our state's population, get their health care through Medicaid. This number, these 3 million people, include children, pregnant and postpartum women, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families. Unlike last year's budget, this one fully funds the Medicaid rebase for the coming year. 3 million North Carolinians and their providers are getting the peace of mind and health care that they deserve. This is a big win for North Carolina. This budget delivers for TW. TW Randall and his family have lived in their home in Bakersville in Mitchell County for about 20 years. When Hurricane Helene struck, their house flooded, causing damage to the foundation and roof. The Randall family didn't have anywhere else to go, so they stayed in their home until they got sick from the mold. Then they faced both a North Carolina summer and a mountain winter in a camper without the shelter of their home. TW works as a manager for the long-term recovery group in Mitchell County. So while he was facing his own challenges, he was hard at work solving other people's. Western North Carolina is dotted with stories like the Randalls, people who are hard at work at their recovery, and it is our job as a state and federal government to match their grit and determination. Western North Carolina, we stand with you. We're sending you more than $700 million in this budget. This is the third Hurricane Helene recovery package that I have signed since I was governor. This money will fuel temporary housing program, the Temporary Housing Assistance Program. It will support local governments. It will help fight wildfires, and it will repair more private roads and bridges. It will also fund more volunteer-driven home repairs like the one that helped the Randalls. It's also going to unlock matching funds from federal recovery programs. The state of North Carolina is committed to rebuilding Western North Carolina over the long haul, and I am grateful for the legislature's partnership in this work. There are other ways that this budget delivers. The General Assembly heeded my request to fund Sunbucks for next summer. This keeps kids fed through the hungriest part of the year when they are not at school. They agreed to restart the state's Healthy Opportunities Pilot, which helps Medicaid beneficiaries maintain access to healthy food, transportation, stable housing, ultimately improving their health outcomes and saving taxpayer dollars. They also agreed to remove the data center sales tax exemption for electricity so that you and I will no longer be subsidizing their energy consumption. The budget funds the community colleges, Propel NC and Apprenticeship NC, to connect more people to good-paying jobs in high-demand careers that can support a family. It allocates $100 million to child care subsidies so that more parents can find child care that they can afford, especially in our rural communities. And it funds the places we all love, like Zoo Asia and our state parks. Allocates $50 million to preserving our state's farmland. It continues to strengthen the state's cybersecurity efforts and the DMV, which has already seen a reduction in wait times of about 85%. It provides funding for a new Fayetteville Veterans Home and makes significant investments in testing for and treating PFAS and other forever chemicals so that North Carolinians can trust the water they drink from their tap. When we work together across our differences, and when we put our people first, we can get good things done for the people of North Carolina. These investments we are making today will move our state forward. They will point the way forward as well, where we need to keep going because we are not there yet. The truth is, North Carolina, we've got a lot of catching up to do because there have been years of chronic underinvestment in state and public services. The largest starting teacher pay raise in history still does not invest enough in our veteran teachers. The biggest correctional officer raises in our state has seen in years does not move us out of the bottom 10 states in the country. The historic state trooper raises that we're excited about move starting pay from 49th to 41st in the country. If I told y'all we were 41st, you would not be proud, but it is a heck of a lot better than 49th. Nurses and other state employees are going to make less money in real dollars today than they did 2 years ago when we last passed a budget because of inflation. And too many essential behavioral health investments have been left on the table by the General Assembly. For those who lose their job through no fault of their own, there are no increases for unemployment benefits, an area where we are lagging far behind neighboring states. And the budget fails to sustain our NC Career Work Centers, our NC Works Career Centers for those who are seeking employment. Short-sighted. Furthermore, the legislature is continuing to pay wealthy people to send their children to unaccountable private school at the same time our public schools have been chronically underfunded. And while the budget pushes out further tax cuts beyond this year, which is a good thing, it nonetheless maintains future reckless pre-programmed tax cuts for corporate shareholders and the wealthy. Meanwhile, it failed to enact my working family's tax cuts that would have put more money into people's pockets, people who need it. We should be prioritizing the people of North Carolina, not big corporations. North Carolina's got a good thing going. We really do. And if we want to remain a top state where families want to raise their families, where people want to raise their families, where businesses want to invest, we have to continue to invest in the state, in our people. This commitment cannot be a one-time effort. It has to be something that we do over a period of years. But here's the good news. I know that we can do it. We just did today move this state forward in a meaningful way. We've shown that we can work together and deliver for the people of North Carolina. So let's celebrate this milestone, and then let's keep pushing. Come next spring, I will be ready and eager to work with the General Assembly on next year's budget so we can continue this progress we are making today.
There's Governor Josh Stein there signing the budget and sharing his, agreements and disagreements. Of course, it is not the same as what he had suggested in his proposed budget. Of course, Republican General Assembly, Democratic governor, but some key issues there, of course, that were addressed: teacher raises, law enforcement raises. Kind of coming back to what we're dealing with in Charlotte is taking back some of those tax breaks for data centers. So a lot of really key points in there, but of course, it kind of underscores the general disconnect of the General Assembly right now, that it took so long. Yeah,
at least disconnect with maybe some of what his priorities would be, or Democrats' priorities would be. I mean, it's $34 billion. It's one of the largest state budgets in the country, for what's becoming one of the biggest states in the country. As a citizen, I'm glad to see that we actually have a budget now. But the way our state is set up, it's as it currently set up, it's never going to be the governor's probably first choice, regardless of sort of his political background, because the General Assembly has so much power to say in this. And I think this budget actually stripped even more power away from the governor and making him even less powerful. I think the governorship in North Carolina is like the least powerful now in the United States. So he was sort of up against a rock and a hard place in that the teacher raises weren't what he wanted. I know a lot of critique within the teaching community about that this focused a lot more on recruitment rather than retention, and that a lot of the bulk of the raises are for new teachers and teachers coming in, and not for keeping, veteran teachers. I know there's some controversy around the pay raises for state troopers, and the fact that well, I think it might be 13%. The governor says this now basically takes us from 49 in the country to 41. Oh. And who would be excited about us being 41? I know, exactly. So
you compare that to the 3% that other state employees are getting.
Exactly. And as he said, that 3% does not even cover inflation for the last couple of years that they've gone without one. So, but realistically speaking, there wasn't much he could do about it.
There was not. I mean, at this point too, there wasn't much can you imagine if he didn't sign it and sent it back? I mean, can you imagine the back and forth then?
Exactly.
It's taken us this long to get here. I actually would be really curious to see the governor's power in North Carolina directly compared to some of the other states around us.
And I think to quote you, it always comes back to the I-77 toll lanes, because in that budget was also part of the Vicki Sawyer amendment of saying that the cities and towns who come out against the toll project, and many already have, but after a 90-day period, those who come out in support of the toll lanes will not have to pay that sort of reimbursement fine. And we still got to see how that plays out among Charlotte and other municipalities. We had the mayor of Monroe, of course, last week. So
actually, now that you mentioned that, I do want to just break down the timeline for a second. When we got 90 days since Governor Stein signed the budget this past week. But if Charlotte was to change their vote, which would be needed most likely in order for the CRTPO vote to change, that puts us in, I guess, early October range. But the CRTPO meeting for October is after the deadline, so they'd have to really do it by the September CRTPO meeting, which is mid-September, And Charlotte City Council isn't back till August. So there's probably only 3 or 4 meetings before. So this, once they come back, if they are to address it, could happen very, very quickly. And so that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on as well.
Wow. All right. We'll be back after this with what we've learned from this episode of Flashpoint. That's coming up after this. Welcome back to Flashpoint inside the WCNC app. I'm Ben Thompson, joined by Julie Kay. At that time of the show, we talked about what we learned from this episode. Would you like to go first? You want me to go?
Oh, I guess I'll talk about the mayor interview.
Yeah.
I know we've addressed, kind of the big issues of it. Data centers, I-77. We briefly touched on American Airlines. Something that I learned is more about Robert Harrington's conflict resolution style. I got a chance to ask him about that as well,
Yeah.
because that's really one of the key roles that the mayor is
Yeah.
going to have to play. We have seen some heated conflicts over these last 2 in particular groups of council members, prior to as well, but particularly in the
Yeah.
last couple of years, at least that I've been here. It has been quite testy at times, and that
Yeah.
has caused not just issues for me trying to cover it, but also for getting things done and getting to the bottom of issues. And so what I learned is, not just his response to that, but I'm very curious to see that in action, because that's probably one of the biggest roles, other than the tie-breaking vote, that he's going to play.
Because we're rooting for him.
Yeah.
I feel like here on Flashpoint, I often have to define when I'm speaking as a journalist and when I'm speaking as a citizen. And I think now I'm just speaking as a citizen. We want our city to flourish, and we want our city to do well. And part of that is having a mayor who's effective and can wrangle council and get things done. And whether you agree with some of the agenda items or not, you still want to have an effective government. I've said it for years on Flashpoint, and I'll always say it, is that regardless of what it is, you want it to be effective. And we want him to succeed. And of course, we want councils to succeed as well. I'll take that into the thing I learned, and it's sort of on the same point, but on the 77 toll lanes, he talked about, he was less committal with that than he was the data centers, and he talks about getting, community engagement and things like that. To your point, that's going to be a tall order very quickly when you consider we've got 3 months, the clock is ticking, council's away, and one would argue we've already had some community engagement in the last few months, and that's what resulted in
I think the community's been quite clear, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if he's being coy or if he
Right.
I'm not sure there's a lot of time to get more community engagement different than what we've already gotten, and to change community perception, more importantly, which I'm not sure we're gonna have time to do that. This is not a year-long campaign that we have to better educate people on a sales tax referendum like we have in the past.
Which was still quite split.
It was. So I think he's going to find his plate full pretty quickly in the next few months.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I said of only maybe 3 or 4 council meetings, some of those being zoning meetings,
Yeah.
before they'd really actually have to come to a decision here. I am sure behind the scenes they're having conversations about, if we weren't to go back on our the recent vote, do we have the money to even pay that back? Can we afford to have, money taken away from us for transportation projects right now? Because there's other elements to that as well. And so I'm sure there are internal conversations going. If I had gotten a chance to speak with him longer, I would have loved to press more about if I-77 does come back because of this, do you think toll lanes are the best option? So there's still some questions there.
Yeah.
That maybe is where he's going with that community engagement thought process, but I am sure we'll learn more pretty much as soon as council comes back in August.
All right, sounds good. All right, folks, that's going to have to do it for this episode of Flashpoint. We hope to see you back here next week.